Welcome to Teams Tuesday, a podcast about mastering the best about what other people have already figured out. Teams Tuesday focuses on insights and lessons that never expire. You will walk away from every episode with actionable insights that help you get better results and be more productive.
This was about as bizarre and easy as it gets.
The client just couldn't make up their mind.
I feel like we had top.
Went from a project of 20 weeks to just 2.
The DevOps was a cultural shift.
This is Teams Tuesday with your host, Peter Ward.
Welcome to Teams Tuesday. It's May 2025, and I've got a great guest, Richard Hartbridge, on Mastering AI for Team Leaders. Now, Richard, I met you probably about 2010, 2011. You were like doing a lot of talks on governance, and you seem to have moved on this now.
It's been, with anyone who's been in the SharePoint space as long as I have, you've seen this transition towards, the modern workplace instead of just like documents and processes. And so governance has never gone away. It's just different now, a different scale with like item level, document level, things like that versus like the collection and service level. And now, for the biggest emphasis we feel right now is that there's a lot of this great stuff about agents and AI and using it in this really effective way. But I really strongly believe the gap that exists in the marketplace and organizations are struggling the most with is on adoption. So it feels like that's kind of the blend right now is governance and adoption in terms of the stuff that I get to talk about a lot.
Okay, very cool. So tell us a little about yourself, apart from the fact that you live in Canada outside Toronto.
Yeah, I have 3 boys, an 8, a 6, and a 4-year-old boy. I enjoy, family life and video games and things like that. I'm a CTO, spend way too much time on research papers, reading, understanding stuff, playing with AI tools and things of that nature. When I'm not doing that stuff, fantasy, sci-fi, whether it's movies, books, games, I enjoy. So, just trying to, find, like everyone else is, navigate to get the most out of this constructive change that's happening across the industry and also just trying to enjoy life.
Okay, so sci-fi, what sci-fi are you watching these days?
I'm very excited. Dune is a thing that I've enjoyed for many, many years, and it's really exciting that Denis Villeneuve brought the movies out, and I think the 2 movies he's made are fantastic. So I've been enjoying just kind of revisiting that universe and some of the Brian Herbert and later books that I haven't really spent as much time on. I also really like Brandon Sanderson. And so I know it's not as much TV and movies, but I feel like I'm spending a lot of time just like in the Cosmere, which is, his universe of books. So that's mainly where I'm spending most of my time today. And he has a great motto, which is the journey matters more than the destination. So journey before destination. And, whether you're doing a migration or whether you're tackling AI, it's absolutely about the journey right now.
Why don't you say every 2 months I do a welcome to new employees in the company. And I always say, look, people say it's the destination that counts, and that's not true. It's the journey. And if you don't know if you don't know your journey, you're never going to get to the destination.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to make sure you enjoy it and grow. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. Okay. Tell us something about yourself that people don't generally know.
So I used to do extreme martial arts, Batman lines and like flips and B-twists and stuff like that. But the other one I think most people don't know unless we've had some drinks is I have like the most crazy horror stories of my first day at work for 2 of my first jobs. So knocking down whole wall systems for hangar systems and things like that in a maintenance worker role. And then another one where I literally had I clogged the line with like old milk products when they were supposed to go into new ones and I got it all wrong. And it's, both have a positive end. Like they both were, I got Employee of the Month, within those first 2 months and, things were really good and I kept those jobs, but it shows like no matter how hard you have a day or a bad day, things can turn out well. So those are probably the ones that most people haven't heard those stories. They would take too long for us to dive into them here, but yeah, they're pretty substantial mistakes I've made in my career.
All right, another Teams Tuesday, perhaps. Okay, I'm on that. Right, so what are you talking about today?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we all have right now is we're all trying to navigate, AI. We're trying to navigate it as leaders. And when we think about how we do that, I think a lot of organizations can make a mistake. So what I mean by that is most organizations focus, rightly so, on the process automation. You think about your organization and you're like, okay, let's improve our processes. So we have this sort of model where a purchase order comes in, we have that come in the ERP system, let's say, we have a bunch of steps that happen, and then, the order is processed on a truck. And in that sequence, we essentially have what we call capital P processes. So those are like CRM, customer experience systems, anything that's like a major system. And each of those are using AI today, which is great. But then there's this exceptions throughout the business, and we call those people processes or lowercase p processes. And those exceptions are where, people use Microsoft 365, they use meetings, they use, collaboration, they use Teams, they use tools like that to kind of make ends meet and kind of fix those gaps. And what ends up happening is as people bridge between these systems, we have this wonderful thing called Copilot. We have these digital assistants, and the digital assistants fit there. They fit with those people processes, right? They fit with those, lowercase p patterns in the business. And the downside is at a leadership, like I spent a lot of time in boardrooms, like with executives, and, a lot of times there's this perception that the capital P processes are highly valuable and the lowercase p processes are just productivity numbers and, costs. And so the mistake there is that if you look at it that way, you're not really getting the full value of what this AI transformation looks like. When we have these digital transformations with AI, specifically in this post-generative AI era, what we're seeing is that it's really taking not just productivity, but quality and then growth, which is being driven by those lowercase p processes. And so the easiest way to describe it is, let's say I'm in a boardroom. I just had a conversation the other day that went like this, talking to the C-suite. They're describing what they want to do. They're definitely seeing it as a capital P process system sequence. Great, there's some great AI projects there. We talked about it and I said, well, whatever happens after the truck, right? So once your product gets to this truck, like what happens after that? What if you could be in the living room? Like what would that change? And there's this big question of like, well, we don't have the capacity for it. We're not capable of it today. We have all these other challenges that present ourselves from being able to grow multitudes of growth, like multiples of growth. And the question then is, well, if you could do that, what would that look like? And if we used our capacity, right, our people, our talent, and we essentially help them become more productive, we help them improve quality, then doesn't this become more accessible, especially using AI nowadays and in the many ways that we can use it as like an accelerant, right, to bridge into new markets or new patterns. So that's the nature of the discussion. And then if there's an understanding there, it becomes a question of like, well, then how do we get our teams freed up enough that they can explore whether it's, that big example or whether it's little micro examples of adding more value, differentiating competitively in the marketplace, improving patient outcomes a little bit more or helping, student learning a little bit more. And I think that's where, some leaders get it and they just need ammunition and support. And then there's other leaders who just haven't been kind of challenged the right way to see that this is the growth that you're really going to see. And we see much more ROI in this, lowercase p people process work than we do in the capital P ones, because that's where all the agent sprawl is happening in a good way, right? Like this adaptive use of agents is really closer to the business. It's closer to a line of business or a team leader who's like, hey, I understand the process. We have shared interest and we can solve this. And now that I understand some elements of AI, I'd like to do this with AI. And you might need a little bit of support getting it over or getting it started. But a lot of times that's where you start to see really strong innovation and growth, at scale in organizations today.
Okay. No, that makes sense. The key thing is that if you can scale and streamline, which are two words you don't often hear in the same sentence, you've got to win.
Absolutely.
On that front. But yes, and I'm assuming you wrap all this up into with Microsoft technology.
Exactly. So, one of the biggest things we've been finding, maybe I'll just talk about some research and share a report or two here. So one of the research reports that just came out, a great piece from Harvard, basically on a working paper on the way individuals and teams work. And so one of the things we're finding in the Copilot deployment space is that, we've gotten pretty good success at getting individuals to get to that adoption layer, right? So it's like 11 weeks. It takes time. But if you scale things right, you use promptathons, you use different techniques, you can get adoption the way you want it. But what we're missing out on is team AI value. So what happens is individuals are starting to use AI, right? And they're finding effective ways to do that. And they can outperform, the report here is basically saying a team without AI is outperformed by individuals with AI, right? And that makes sense. for small teams, like you're going to see individuals with AI outpace them. There's a lot of reasons for this. Low value collaboration shifts to AI because people use these digital assistants because it provides the skills and knowledge they have, and so on and so forth. But teams with AI really perform more in, this is specifically the top 10% of quality or the more challenging solutions in this particular services firm that this report is analyzing. And so you take the more complex work we're doing, the harder stuff, and that's where teams with AI really outperform individuals with AI. And we're seeing this continue to grow, this idea that teams with AI really, really outperform. And so based on that, what we're seeing is Microsoft's also starting to shift, right? You're seeing that, yes, of course, they have Copilot experiences. We have amazing stuff with Excel and things like that. But you're seeing this shift towards like multiplayer by design. How do we make Copilot or AI in the workplace not just an individual experience that works really well, but one that works with teams? And so that's SharePoint agents. One of my favorite examples of that, that by far one of my favorite examples of that is Copilot Pages. I don't know if you've played with them a lot. Like there's an update to Copilot Pages that some customers have and that many of us will see shortly, where basically you can have conversations, right, with AI. You store the artifact as a Copilot page. And this is what you kind of see here is we have these sort of persistent places where the chat results or the conversation results from AI are stored. But then you can share this with other people. So now let's say two people are working on this particular strategy outline, and another person wants to add a section that talks about marketing tactics. So when they do that, it adds this section. You can kind of see it down here. And then maybe somebody else takes that and says, oh, I really want this to be reformatted as a table. I think that would make this look a lot better and it'd be presented in this way. And then another person, takes another step. But what's important about this sequencing is that you can actually go back in the history, kind of like version history. These pages support this capability where you can kind of see exactly what changed between one change and another. And so we've all talked about helping people understand how to use AI better, but there's nothing more effective than actually just seeing how your peers are prompting. So as you collaborate, as you build artifacts, as you build, in this particular example, a strategy outline, you're going to see how other people are using AI. What prompts are they using? How are they formatting it? And that idea of that collaborative nature, with this sort of versioning combined with the visibility of each other's prompts makes a world of difference. And so I think this is one of my favorite examples of up-leveling. We have in ChatGPT or in Google, like a lot of people have places that they can store their history. We have something called Copilot notebooks for that, right, in Copilot. But the difference is when we start to have these collaborative spaces, right, in this case, a page, it starts to enable new ways that people can learn. And it's not just this, obviously. You could have things like, I could quickly share prompts. I love to do this as an example. You take a prompt, it works really well for you, you save
this
it.
is the prompt gallery, yeah.
Yeah, in the prompt gallery, and you share that with your team. So, these are two examples, I think, but there's so many more that are coming around agents and how we share agents and how we share experiences. And I think we're only, from both an industry perspective and from a Microsoft perspective, we're only starting to scratch the surface of all the ROI that we can get from team-based AI usage. And so that's what I'm really keen on right now. And we're finding, a lot of excitement around because it's also directly correlated to agents. Like when we're seeing spin up of agents, like SharePoint agents that become, Copilot Studio agents and do a little bit more, they're almost always through these starting points of, some prompts. The prompts get scheduled. People start to understand that, okay, beyond scheduling and this thing called Copilot Actions, which hopefully will stay released soon, that you have some advanced capabilities and they kind of mature their way up into agents. And, if you can accelerate that curve and more of these leaders are on that journey, you'll find a lot more of that growth, right? Those improvements we want to see.
No, I agree. It reminds me a little bit of the people on SharePoint, and you kind of want to say, what are people actually searching on? Because quite often they'll search on something, and then that same person will have to do another search 3 or 4 times, and so they can't to get to that content. So that means either the data is not being tagged correctly, or it's a end user training thing.
Absolutely. It's funny too, because like one of my favorite, I don't think people realize the impact or implications of it. But when Microsoft changed here, I'll share another screen for a second. If you haven't seen the new Copilot home experience, we have Copilot Search, which is separated now. So one of the top things people do with Copilot is they start a prompt with like a search, which is, Copilot can do it. But because it's looking, at the context, it's looking at recency, it's looking at your network, it's really unlikely it's going to search in the same way. Right? The success rate's really low. And so something as simple as saying, okay, when you want to do a search with Copilot, click here, gets people to use that other space instead. And we're already seeing that leads to greater success. The other comment on like the metadata, the value of your data, one of the things that I think we do run into is that people generally understand where their data is and where that content is more valuable. And so besides this new search experience, the one that we've seen the most impact on that side has been the Copilot SharePoint agents. So these SharePoint agents work because all they really do in the simplest way is they refine. So instead of looking at everything, you're just looking at a selection of content, right? A sub-site, a collection of what's within a site, or across a few sites, you pick some particular resources. And because we do that little bit of curation, all of a sudden you get much higher results. So even when people aren't searching, they're still searching because so much of what you start with when you start to work with AI is like, how do I make this easier, not just for me to work on it? And again, it goes back to that idea of like, it's not my individual productivity, but how do I help others? And that goes back to that team leader. So a team leader is going to say, well, I know where those artifacts are. I know where our project resources are. Let me make that simpler for everyone by making an agent for that project. And then people don't really need to search for it. They just simply call the agent, or they mention the agent in that channel, or, however the team prefers to work, right? Some people work in email and web, and some people work in Teams. And so you kind of navigate to where your team is already working, and you kind of bring the AI experience or the search experience directly into that flow.
Right. Now, this also comes up to like, when you mention the word collaboration it means I have to do an extra step to help you. It doesn't actually help me, it helps you. So what's in it for me? So therefore, there's a little bit of a mind share set of getting that person to say, you need to do a few extra steps to help the whole team. Else I'm just going to email the attachments around.
Yeah. So how everyone says meetings suck, right? And it's true, right? We have too many meetings suck. Like those are the two top issues. Well, interestingly, there's sort of, I'm going to simplify it as like, have you ever heard like 1 + 1 = 3? Like this, it's a silly thing, but it's like, if you had an hour, Peter, and I had an hour, and we put our heads together, we would produce something on average that would be much better than if you had 2 hours or I had 2 hours. And that makes sense, right? Because you're bringing your skills and knowledge, I'm bringing my skills and knowledge, and we produce something better. Now that's good collaboration, right? That's high value collaboration. The problem is when you start to add more people. So let's say we have 6 people. Well, now, if you have 6 people, how likely is it that they're going to bring their skills and knowledge, or that there's going to be times where they're more passive, right? Or disengaged from the active value of the collaboration flow. Or let's take another example. You're really great at finding stuff in SharePoint, Peter. I want you to help me find, stuff in SharePoint. That's kind of transactional. Like I'm not really bringing my skills or knowledge. I'm just bringing you challenges, and you're bringing your skills and knowledge, and I'm taking advantage of it almost transactionally. So we call this low value collaboration. And what happens with AI is, again, these are the problems with collaboration. Well, AI changes this in 2 big ways. One, it makes low value collaboration a lot more accessible. So what I mean by that is, instead of me interrupting you and using your skills, I can use AI. I can say, AI, help me find this document. AI, help me, build a better presentation in PowerPoint. Help me, find the right way to summarize this data within Excel. And so in each of those sequences, what's happening is there's less of this low value collaboration interrupt on other people. And there's more of you actually use it more to help you with a lot of these skills and knowledge. So AI, of course, has an ever increasing amount of skills, ever increasing amount of knowledge. And so when you combine those things, you see a positive impact on meetings. We see a reduction in low value collaboration meetings you can't just be like AI champions here and there. It has to be like a saturated team. When a team is saturated, they all have AI, right? They all have access to it for individual usage. That's when you see this really big reduction in low value collaboration. But conversely, we see an increase in high value collaboration because people are freed up more, because people can work more collaboratively. The nature of a meeting changes. So my favorite example of this is, imagine a whiteboard. We're coming up with ideas to improve a website. What ends up happening is everyone knows how to use AI to generate ideas. So one person's generating ideas, everyone's talking about them, and then you start to split up. Within the first few minutes of the meeting, some people, let's say 2 people in that meeting, they start to take those ideas that are being generated and start to categorize them, organize them. What do? They use AI to do that, right? Because AI is quite good at categorizing. Well, while those two people are doing that, one person keeps generating more ideas. Why not, right? Like they're still listening, but they can keep generating new ideas using new prompts and other techniques with AI. And then maybe a fourth person in that meeting who again is still listening, but isn't as engaged because they're really about downstream. They're really more about the tactics, like how are we going to execute this for tasks, who's going to be assigned. They start to take a few of those ideas and really start to build out work breakdown plans. And they're using AI to do that. In that instance, every person is using AI slightly differently. Everyone is collaborating, but everyone is, more active in that collaboration flow. And that's what we see. And that's why it's so transformative. It's not just that we, meetings suck less because we have less of those transactional meetings and things like that. But we actually see that we can do a lot more. We can accomplish a lot more within the collaboration events like a meeting than we could before, both before the meeting, during, and after. And that's also why like Microsoft's so great. Like Microsoft Teams works within that before, during, and after, right? Whereas Zoom, while I love it, it's very much during the meeting, and rarely does it allow you to really do the stuff before and after, right? In the same quality that Microsoft does. So what we're seeing is, it used to be 1 + 1 = 3, right? If we use that kind of fake math for collaboration. Now what we're seeing is it's 1 times AI, because each person uses AI their own way, plus 1 times AI, plus 1 times AI, and all of that is multiplied by AI once we start to get into agents and, more complex. And remember, this is the dumbest AI will ever be, so we only see that, getting more and more capable and, for both knowledge access and skills than it is today.
Well, yeah, the Copilot. Well, did you ever use ChatGPT 3?
Yes.
Yeah. So when that came out, I thought, yeah, this looks pretty good actually. And then of course, when 4 came out, it was like, wow, this is super, super good actually. But I could see where it was going, and going. It's a bit like I remember using Windows 2, which was the first graphical interface, and then Windows 3 came out, and then 3.1. But I could still say, oh yeah, this is actually really cool, actually, and getting used to it. But the fact that it could produce the content, it could get its tentacles and stuff, that was like that. Right, this is on for a winner here actually.
Yeah.
And and like you said, it's only going to get better and more integrated into into Windows 11, into the hardware, into the file. On that. So it could be exciting times, but it's always exciting times.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have these aha moments, right? You use it yourself, and then you go, oh, aha, I get it. Like it's able to do this richer thing that I didn't expect. Something that is meaningful to you, something that we call it validity or verification, right? Like there's as AI helps us deal with increasing velocity, ever increasing velocity, variety, and volume, it increases the demand it puts on us is more veracity, right? And so one of the things that I find interesting is you have both an increase in aha moments, especially collectively, right, as this rolls out and more teams use it. But then what you have is you also have this increasing need for verification and validity. And, I think that's both positive and negative. The positive of that is it means there's a lot of value in bringing people along for that journey because we need to scale that, not just like governance and guardrails, but we need, to build that skill of reflection. We don't value our ability to reflect as much. And AI really demands that from us as leaders and individuals going through this change, to the point like that we find in projects, like let's say you want to train team leaders with AI, like there's much more focus on, the softer skills, the people management, the talent management, than sometimes the harder skills, which is counterintuitive because you think, well, of course the how to use Excel, how to use it to like summarize meetings and things like that makes total sense. Like that should be the focus. But if you just do that, you miss out because you're just treating AI as a delegation, like a delegation partner. And you need to treat AI as both a delegation partner and a thought partner. And that wasn't true back in 3.0, right? But now it's becoming very, very much the case. And obviously with agents, that pushes the importance of both of those working together even further.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, co-leader.
Exactly.
Okay, where it's like, okay, I'm doing a town hall meeting for a bunch of sort of accountants. Okay, what would be the kind of questions which might be asked? So you put the PowerPoint into Copilot and ask those questions. And what supporting data might I need in those questions so it can bring those up?
Yeah, my favorite example of this. like we all do the prompt like what questions am I missing, or we all tune out for a meeting for a second, right? Like what was just said as I'm like researching something related to something else someone said. My favorite one, if you've never tried this, you should try this prompt yourself on some recent meetings you've had. So what you do is, instead of what questions are unresolved, right, or suggest follow-up questions, or like in your prep work, I really like this one. So you take meetings, especially when there's like a meeting type that you do a lot. So this was a meeting we had on webinar planning. So we do this a lot, right? And I was like, okay, let's look at the differences in perspective. So when you look at differences of perspective, you actually see patterns across meetings. So if you're working with a team of people, right, in this case, Campbell and I are working together a lot on webinars, well, a topic comes up a lot. Like, how much do we use of Microsoft's material versus our material, right, or our customer's material? What's the right balance there? Because not everyone even knows that, Adoption Center and resources for Microsoft exist, that there's all these great techniques like what questions are unresolved and prompting and things like that. But it's this differences of perspective that creates this really interesting, rich understanding. And when you use this across meetings, you find that there are patterns, and then that allows you to create entire meetings specifically about the perspectives. And then that, it increases the value, or kind of takes you to the next level as that team. And so one of my favorite prompts is this one where you say, list different perspectives by topic, or whatever your framing is, pros and cons, show it as a table, whatever the format is you want. And I find this really fascinating, both during meetings and then, especially after meetings, when I want to look back at, a meeting series or the types of discussions we're having.
Yep, that makes sense. But the other thing about, like, with generative AI, because I can now write more documents. But wait a minute here. Like, this is a bit like emails. Like 20 years ago, we gave Blackberries out to say, you can now answer your emails in the car or at home, whatever. All that happened was that people just sent more emails around. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, hang on, with Gen AI, you can now create documents and PowerPoints. Wait a minute here. Are we just going to be just emailing more content around, which no one's reading anyway?
Yeah, it's funny because there's a stat slide. I know it's a little bit broken on this right side because I just added this new stat, but this is from Statistica and a few other places. One of the things that we see is, like, it makes sense. Like, everyone feels this, right? Like the volume. This is like, we had social media, like internal enterprise social, right? The Viva Engaged, Yammer before it. We had those, and it didn't reduce the emails, right? We get more emails, not less. These are work emails, right? They're for work accounts. Or we have like the apps. Oh, okay. Well, we'll see consolidation, right? We'll use Microsoft 365, and we'll have Teams, and Teams will be like the main app, and then we'll use maybe Outlook, and we'll use Outlook and Teams, and that's kind of true. But then it becomes another one and another app, and this is more and more. And so the number of apps we use keeps increasing, and then the interrupts we get are increasing. Now, as of the last work trend report from this year, we see every 2 minutes on average people are getting interrupted. That's a big transition from, it feels like a lifetime ago, 15 years ago, but like from 12 minutes to 2 minutes, that's a big change in the amount of interrupts. And so yeah, we can't work that. This is what I always run into. Like, I get it. Like, I still use Outlook. I use Outlook, not Teams. Like, my preference for my work, because I do so much external, I use Outlook a lot. But I'll tell you, I have had to change the way I work because of these things. If you're ever increasing variety, volume, and velocity, you can't do that without changing how you work, right? New tools and things like that. So I totally feel what you're saying. Like, this is, and again, there's this promise that AI is going to solve this gap, right? There's this like visual here. I'll show another visual. We talk about this all the time. Like, oh my God, people expect more, right? But we're overwhelmed. Can AI bridge it? And I actually think, yes, AI will help bridge this, but I think it's going to make it harder because AI creates even new, like, compelling expectations for responsiveness, so velocity. It creates totally new expectations for volume because, like, I should be able to have everything I want hyper personalized and, the contextual context that I want. And so I actually think AI is going to make the expectations keep increasing. And then we literally have no choice but to use AI to keep up with it. And, so I don't know if we'll ever bridge this gap. As much as I love AI for it, I think actually AI will probably accelerate this further. It's just that without AI, we'll absolutely fall behind.
Well, would be a very cool feature in Teams is that if you could put the messaging on pause for, say, 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
So, or for 5 minutes. So you don't get any messages for 5 minutes, and then you just get like a download, a blast out, and then if you just did that every 5 minutes. That would be very cool. But the other things as well, like, you've got things like, you can get an AI tool that will allow you to apply for 1,000 jobs a day.
Right.
Okay. wait a minute. So now the company needs an AI tool to filter through all the resumes. Okay, so it's almost like an arms race of, okay, I can produce more content, but how do I actually receive and consume the content?
Yeah.
On that.
It's funny because like I think the HR one's a bit harder with the resume thing because that has like a lot of challenges. But I will say we run into it internally all the time, right? So like I don't know, take comms. So in most organizations, everyone, from leaders of a team who are role leaders, or relational leaders, maybe they don't actually have any role authority, they're just trying to lead as best they can, but all the way up to like executives, everyone has to communicate. And so when we communicate, we think of like, well, how do we communicate better? And I run into this all the time, right? Like, what's the technique? What's the way which we communicate? And I think this is where, going back to the earlier point, it's tempting to say, well, let's just create more. So you do higher quality communication. Great. Like everything I say, make it look more like this person that I really admire for their writing style. Let me, summarize more in this way. Let me do, so you're doing more. But the downside for that is then, that's a lot of noise for the other side. So the question becomes, intranet teams as an example, in corporate comms, you're seeing this push, which I'm really excited about, more human stories. Because if you can summarize with Copilot, which you can, by the way, in the latest builds for Viva Connections, if you can summarize news across all these sites, right, then people don't go to the pages. So, the whole point of corporate comms is so that people immerse themselves. It's not just about getting the information to people, it's about immersing yourself in it enough that like you align, right? That you start to align with what they're telling you, messaging, helping you connect with. And so having a human story about an employee that's really engaging and interesting is not summarizable as much by AI. You'll want to engage in that. You'll want to go to that, click through to read that article. And maybe in there we can make it better. We can make it more contextualized. We can have more visuals, whatever, using AI. But at the end of the day, it's actually a return to like what really matters. When you have all these priorities, like how do we really create that immersion, that focus? You mentioned focus time, right, with teams. And my other favorite example of this is like this thought partner one. So in that example we just gave, we can use it as a delegate to help us improve the quality of that human content, to connect with other people in the organization. But I actually really like this one we've seen where people take, let's say we've all had this, like a meeting that just feels a little off. And so you're like, how do I do better with that? Like, how do I take that and learn something from this and make a difference? Well, most of us, especially myself, I don't have great EQ skills. So I can use AI to reflect. So this is being a thought partner. Instead of automating and delegating and saying, help me draft better, I'm saying, hey, help me think about this. I had this meeting, it felt off. What might have went wrong? And so AI can then, after a light prompt could say, oh yeah, you know what? There's actually some issues with this meeting. You said no a lot and you cut the meeting abruptly and you didn't really engage with the answers that people provided. And so, here's what you could do differently. And I'm busy, so I'm like, okay, put it on a sticky note, right? Give me this in a sticky note. This is my second response here, and I'll put it on my like monitor because I like visuals like that. And then I'll work on that. In fact, maybe I'll take this and I'll actually say, okay, look at all of the chats I've had, in Teams, in these spaces with these same people, and tell me, am I doing this anywhere else? Not just in meetings interactively, but is it happening in even chats? And of course, chats are even easier because I can reply and then I can kind of make it right later. Whereas a meeting, requires a little bit more effort and timeliness. So this is this idea of using it as a thought partner to help me find ways, and I can literally have it right, like, how should I engage with this person to not apologize maybe if I don't feel it was wrong, but like to engage in it so I can improve this skill. Can I track this moving forward? So next time I have any meeting, can I just say, hey, AI, based on the same thing we did last time, can you look at this transcript, this meeting, and tell me if this happened again? Oh, you know what? It's timely. I can reach out to them right now and see if I can make this a little bit better. But like I think that's what we're saying is it's not about quantity, right? It's about quality and it's about, what the value and priorities are. And I feel like the more you use AI as this thought partner in the sequence of work, whether you're doing it at scale as like an executive or a communications team, or whether you use it, as an individual, I think that's where you really start to get the biggest benefits, and it cuts through the noise because now it's humans, like you making a judgment call, you reaching out, you bridging that gap and changing habits and, kind of not ignoring the stuff that we all ignore that slowly builds like this debt, right, that we can't see over time.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. All right. Do you have any more slides, or are we getting close to the end?
I mean, you know me, I could share things forever.
I know you could probably do a part 2 on this, and yeah. Okay, we've got 10 minutes left. So actually, is there any questions coming in?
Yeah, I'd love to engage
Some-
with some of the questions, or yeah, let's pivot a little bit there.
Okay, I know somewhat mesmerized in that. Okay, it's just loading.
You know, while you're doing that, one of the other things that I've loved is in the latest work trend report, Microsoft calls human to agent ratios. And my favorite argument on that is, yes, it's really important. You know, if you have too many, people get overwhelmed. It increases risks and things like that. If you have too few, you know, it's quite problematic because we're losing out on efficiencies. But I always caveat it as, if you want to get more agents, then you need more champions, and we need more power users, and we need more centers of excellence, right? And we need more of these things that empower that, you know, group to be able to scale with those agents. And so, yeah, so I always talk about champion ratios, or I talk about other ratios when we talk about human to agent ratios. So that's like a thing I think that's always interesting.
Someone was asking, can you co-collaborate? So if you and I think the person's asking, if you and I are working on the same document, can we have our same co-pilots on the same document?
So the way it works today is the output of your Copilot, right? So like, let's say you have it temporarily and you say keep it. Once you click that keep it, and obviously the document saves, then the other person will see it. So in that instance, it's like a delay factor where you have your agent, your Copilot digital assistant that you're using, and then I have mine. Obviously, we screen share and stuff. You can see a little bit of that a little bit more transparently. It's a little different in other experiences where the problem with that example is if I'm doing it in, say, Word, and I click that keep it, I don't know what you prompted, right? Like I can't see the process you went through to make those decisions. Now you can have a little bit of that history that like we can dive deeper into like the audit log and things like that. But the reality is that is a newer experience set that they're working on. And where that will happen over time is closer to like Copilot pages, these specific artifacts that are meant to be, you know, multiplayer by design in the first place, where more of that will light up. So the example I gave before, we can work in a Word document and build out some nice reports and charts. But if we're using AI to do that, we can't really see what each other prompted, unless again we have a recording and we're sharing our screen. But if we use, you know, Copilot pages with that update that should be shipping very soon for many of you, you'll see that, you know, being able to see that history, right, of what each person prompted, and that's a kind of an up level. But it won't come to Word right away. It'll be in these other places first, and then over time, as Microsoft shares more about this plan that they have around how the entirety of the UX will change as they, you know, embrace AI. You know, the UX for AI is the new Microsoft Copilot experiences. You'll see some ideas on how they think they can bridge back towards those, you know, very functional use cases directly within documents. But I think that's probably the way I'd break it up today.
Can a company have a standard prompt library?
Yeah, so I think the Copilot Gallery is a really, really good place to use. If you're a Microsoft customer, you got to embrace it. It's there, it's embedded. Microsoft has it. You can add every agent or third party you use. Like let's say you're using Workday or ServiceNow, both have pretty good agents. I don't know if they're preview or whatever, but whenever everyone else has access to them. So those agents have prompts as well, and so they automatically show up in those libraries, those galleries, which is really nice. So you have a mix of first party prompts. You have a mix of third-party prompts, and then you have a mix of enterprise prompts or team-shared prompts, etc. So when we run promptathons, one of the most common attributes, like at the end of the promptathon that comes out of it, outputs from it, is this prompting books, like these books that are basically a bunch of great prompts that everyone's come up with that we really like. And what we really encourage during that, of course, we make it an asset just because some people like that artifact and it's easier to engage with, but we want those to all be within the Copilot Gallery, right? All the really good ones, so people can access them and share them. And then this improves over time, because one of the things I guess we didn't really talk about, but let me just share my screen, is that there's this like ratio, right? There's things like that are coming to the Copilot Gallery, and that makes a big difference because then you can really start to see what prompts are trending, which prompts are more frequently used, which ones do you save, if you're saving them for your own prompts later. So all those kind of features are pre-built, and it's better to use what Microsoft's provided here than your own. Now, if you are using a multiple AI scenario, we have lots of customers who are doing that. Maybe they're using a mix of Gemini and Copilot. If they're using ChatGPT, and for marketing, they're using specific marketing AI tools, and then they're using that. Then obviously the need for your own center of excellence and your own prompt galleries increase. But if you can get away with using the out of the box, I encourage it, because the feature set will continue to improve around Microsoft's integration with Prompt Gallery, how easy it is to use. And I love it because there's a lot of prompts. I'll actually take a prompt that has document references. If you've never done this, so you take a prompt, it's pointing to specific documents that I know my team has access to. And instead of like a SharePoint agent, I just share that prompt. I save it and I share it. If someone else clicks on that prompt, it fills out those documents. So it's pointing to the same documents, like the exact same prompt. If obviously someone does it without the access, it won't work the same way. But for those who have access, it's really seamless. So they see the exact, the same initial prompt that I used to hopefully get very similar result. Obviously, AI is a little inconsistent from person to person and execution to execution, but you'll see a very common set of results. So that's a really common thing. Like we use scheduling prompts and Copilot actions, but the one that we see the most sharing is someone comes up with that prompt that finally works for like a proposal, and it's pointing at 3 documents, and then someone else uses that, and all they have to do is change those few documents. Or literally, if they want to see it themselves because they've never done it before, they click that button and it generates, that proposal the way they wanted it, based on someone else like myself or whoever who's done it a few times and kind of cleaned up and made a more optimal prompt.
Well, I think we're almost at a limit here. I think Richard Hartbridge, the CTO, or maybe the Prince of Prompts. There you can put that to your little LinkedIn headline. A promptathon. I've never heard of that. Yes, hackathon, promptathon. I like that. I might speak to Tom on that one to see what we should do something like that. A promptathon.
Yeah, and if you like that, the next step after that, if you have a few of those that run really well, and you can make them departmental, you can make them organizational wide, is you do automation-a-thons, which is basically like, how do we help people build those SharePoint agents? How do we help people, do a little bit of Copilot Studio, right, and things like that, or just Power Platform. Like a lot of people aren't using Power Automate, or now the quick automations, like the quick actions, even in a library that most people don't even know exist for approvals and things like that. So automation-a-thons are really a big hit as well, and they're a nice follow-up. Get people kind of introduce the prompts and digital excellence, and then you kind of take it a step further with these, whatever you want to call them, automation-a-thon, agent-a-thon, this next step. But yeah, both are really effective today.
All right. Okay. Richard, are you coming to New York in July?
I hope to, but I will I have to double check a few things. So I will not be speaking, but I love the AI community days. I just did one in Boston a little while ago, which was fantastic. So anyone who's listening to this, who's on the fence, please go to the AI community days. They're like amazing events and a great place to learn and grow and have debates. Peter, you and I have the best debates, not on camera all the time.
Oh my God, that was in New England, wasn't it, last year? That was a bit intense, actually.
It was.
I'm doing the keynote for the AI event next 2 weeks. Yeah, actually next week in New York.
Excellent. Well, even more reason for everyone to go then. Excellent.
Yes, on that front. Okay, Richard, always good seeing you. Hopefully I'll see you in person shortly. Okay, thanks a lot.
Take good care, everyone.
Bye.